Have come to the panel session on the offshore and the tanker sector, and we have distinguished panelists here sitting with us. Clarence Liu from BW Maritime, Divai Gol, who's from Drury, and George Horsington, who is from Swire, and each of them is an expert in his field. So what I had tried to put some bullet points for discussion purposes together and ideally have them on the screen, but apparently this was not possible or didn't happen, so you will have to do with me reading out bullet points and then talking to our panelists. And obviously, the main participants here are the people of the audience, and we hope to have a lot of questions and a lot of points and comments so that we can try and derive some useful conclusions. Initially, I would like to have as a topic the world oil demand and how this is affected in shipping on the wet side, and especially how China and India can help pull the demand for the shipping sector, for the tankers, as we have heard before, combined with the fall from demand in Europe. So perhaps I can try and ask the question to Clarence. How does he view the supply for the oil sector?
Thank you, Jens. From other research reports, or everybody is looking at China, India, other developing countries, there's no doubt that demand for energy is increasing in the world because of growing population, industrialization. People wanted to have a better standard of living. Chinese people buying more cars. I think this we all know. And we are not going to list every single items of how oil demand is going to be increasing in future. However, I think in shipping is about supply and demand. The question is whether the supply side can catch up with demand. When I am talking about this subject, I'm not saying that the world is running short of oil in next few years or tomorrow. We have a lot of reserve in the earth, but how much can be produced? How much can be pumped out from what we are having today? We are seeing North Sea oil productions declining, Gulf of Mexico declining, a lot of places stagnant, and later on, probably George can help us to talk about offshore, how we develop into offshore side. In BW, we also have a company, BW Offshore, developing into the offshore business production and specialize in FPSOs, and we believe in that, the development in that area very much. Coming to the production of oil, I think we have this nightmare, which is about peak oil production. We have seen a lot of oil companies telling us, a lot of research reports saying oil production will actually decline rather than increase in the next 10 to 20 years because there are restrictions of infrastructure, there are problems of pumping the oil out from the earth. And in order to cope with the demand in energy, I believe in these reports, and we are seeing things happen according to what the research analyst has been saying, and we are also seeing that there is a shift of energy from oil to gas. Although offshore developments can help, but there are delays in offshore projects. There are the increasing rate in offshore production may not be able to cope with the depleting rate for the main source of oil. And we are seeing gas being a future energy, that will be able to replenish, okay, some of this demand, especially when the development of shale gas in U.S. But I think I understand this is not a panel for the gas, so I probably, okay, I just maybe pass it on to other speakers.
Thank you for that. I mean, the issue is perhaps from our point of view, not so much if there is enough oil to go around for everyone and for how long, but the issue is that with the existing number of ships that are coming on stream, and plus the ships that the tankers that are already in circulation, whether there are too many, too few, and what the outlook is likely to be for the shipping industry. I had some statistics which I have taken. They're both for dry and wet, but as you can see, that the total order book in pretty much any categories of ships on the tanker side is pretty substantial, and so more and more ships are coming on stream. And how is that likely to affect the freight levels? Maybe Deva, I would like to comment.
Yeah, just on the demand side first, I think on the longer term, per capita consumption in both India and China is only a fraction of developed countries. So demand is probably going to be robust. We think it will grow at historical rates of 2 to 3% in the next 4 or 5 years. In terms of supply, definitely, as you see, the bigger tanker sectors, they're around 40%, 180 vessels out of 557. Suezmax is also 40% of the current fleet, and that is for the next 5 years. So if demand is growing at 2 to 3% incremental demand, and there is a replacement demand of say 3 to 4%, because if you take an average age of 25 years, you have a demand of around 5 to 6%, but you have supply coming in at more than that at 10% or so. So in the near term, in the next 2 or 3 years, definitely there is going to be a downward pressure on rates and asset values. That's what we think.
George?
I mean, I think one of the key trends that supports tanker demand is where the new oil fields are being located. You've got depletion in the Gulf of Mexico, you've got depletion in the North Sea, and the big new discoveries are a long way from the traditional centers of demand. I mean, Brazil, probably 30 billion barrels of oil have been discovered in the last 5 years there, and so that supports the long-term demand for these long trades from Brazil to China, long trades from Brazil to India, across the Indian Ocean. If you look at elsewhere, the big discoveries in the industry have been in West Africa, which again supports longer term, longer voyages for tankers to Asia from as opposed to the closer fields. There's depletion problems in Asia, in China, in Malaysia, in Indonesia. All these countries have very slow-growing offshore production or declining offshore production. So I think where the oil is being found and where the new production is coming from is actually very supportive of the tanker industry.
That's very good. Anybody from the audience would like to contribute anything? Nobody?
I agree that, okay, I think the new discoveries are actually from West Africa, Brazil, yeah, but I think the quantity of discovery, as I pointed out, does not mean of quantity of production per annum. So the key point that during the discussion about the supply and demand of oil is, yes, okay, we have new discoveries coming up. But these new discoveries, okay, when we turn into production, okay, per annum, million barrels per day production, that is lacking behind the depleting fields, okay, in elsewhere of the world. So overall, I think their concern is really on the amount of oil to be available to be shipped is actually decreasing. And with, the statistics we can see on the new buildings for ships, for tankers, order books, I personally, okay, do have a feeling that, okay, we are going to see, okay, a very dim light, okay, coming into the tanker segment.
Well, I guess there are 3 points to make on that. The first is that the problems of oil supply are often political. I mean, we see this, I mean, it's the obvious topic of discussion at the moment is the unrest in the Arab world. And a lot of oil is in the ground that can't be got out of the ground for political reasons. So if you look at Iranian production now is lower than it was in 1979. This is not because the oil's not there, it's because of the investment restrictions. Again, Venezuelan production is lower now than it was 10 years ago, largely for political and reasons of not getting the investment in there. Iraq has enormous potential, but currently produces less than 3 million barrels a day. Not because the oil's not there, but because of the political issues surrounding its extraction. So I think in the medium term, there's a lot of optimism that oil supply and oil production can grow. You've got deep water fields in new frontier areas, and you've got the opportunity to reinvigorate and invest in traditional oil-producing countries that maybe, for political reasons, have been off limits. So that's very supportive of the longer-term oil production. But as we see in the short term, there are a huge supply of vessels and limited and a highly competitive market. I think my second point would be that if oil prices go too high, that will itself dent demand. We saw in 2008, global financial crisis, a recession following from historically high oil prices of $148 a barrel. So whilst oil companies and oil producers may celebrate high oil prices, I think everyone recognizes that if oil goes too high, it dampens economic growth, increases the risk of recession, and ultimately damages demand. And then I think the third factor is the offshore oil and gas industries had a nasty boom-bust cycle, which culminating in basically $30 oil in January 2009. So it went from $148 to $30 in the space of about 6 months. And now we're back up over $100 again. I think there's a risk that political disruption and concerns over unrest could really dampen global demand and send us back into another boom-bust cycle, which I don't think anyone in this room and anyone in the offshore industry really needs.